Well, last year we saw a record-tying 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round of the NFL draft. They weren't without their flaws, though, really, other than Jayden Daniels. The crew's struggling to find their transition to the NFL. If only we had some red flags when it came to those guys last year. Unfortunately, the class of 2025, no real difference when it comes to our experts, both Pete Prisco and Danny Kannell, saying the same thing in different ways. This quarterback class certainly has some work to do if they are going to impress our crew. Now, as we pivot towards the guys who are in this class, Cam Ward, the consensus #1 overall pick. He comes in as the 3rd highest ranked quarterback prospect on this list as you see a look at the other guys. Now, bear with me. I'm going to get through some stats here that sets up our segment with Danny and Pete. There's been 6 draft classes with 2 or fewer quarterbacks selected in the first round over the last 20 years. Of the 10 in those first classes, only 2 got a second contract. That includes Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco, both in 2008. Only 2 made a Pro Bowl. That list includes Jameis Winston and Matt Ryan. Winston was a Pro Bowl replacement that year, and half had 20 or fewer passing touchdowns in their entire NFL career. So certainly something to pay attention to when it comes to the quarterbacks. We got Pete Prisco back with us on set. Danny Kannell joining us as well here in studio. Guys, I feel like at this point of the draft, we have broken down all the strengths and all the weaknesses, but we really want to get into these red flags when it comes to the quarterbacks. And we're going to start with Cam Ward. We know the pedigree that he brings. He had a tremendous pro day a few weeks ago. However, when you really dive into the numbers and look at the interceptions, he struggled, especially out of the pocket. 2nd most interceptions and the most sacks over the last 3 seasons. Pete, how big of a concern is that when it comes to Cam Ward?
Very. And again, when I evaluate a quarterback, I want a quarterback to go, and you play the position. You have a play, 1, 2, 3, 4, check down. If you're getting to 1 and you're scrambling out and you're making a play outside the pocket and it turns into an amazing play because you were able to escape pressure and throw a ball down the field, when there really wasn't pressure to start the play, then I would look at that as a negative. That's not a positive in my book, because the game has to be played kind of on time. It doesn't always going to work out that way, obviously. So there are concerns about that with him. Does he leave clean pockets? Is there phantom pressure? So the throwing motion is a little different. It's from the side. So there are concerns about him, but he's clearly the best quarterback in this draft class. I don't think there's any question, but if he was in last year's draft, he might be the 6th best quarterback. If he was in next year's draft, he might be the 5th best quarterback. So this year, he's the best. I don't know if it's a slam dunk.
Those kind of throws right there are what are concerning. They're just throws that you try to teach young quarterbacks in high school not to make. And it's got to be at some point where it's okay to take a sack. But Cam Ward has this insane athleticism. He has this insane arm talent. So he's always constantly trying to make the perfect play or to make the highlight reel play. And again, Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback that we see right now. A lot of his plays come off the cuff, and they are highlight plays, but the majority of Patrick Mahomes' plays come from within the pocket. He is going through the progressions that he's supposed to go through, and then he reads out. He's going according to what the defense is giving him. Then he'll go out to his check down. What makes a quarterback go from good to great is the ability to improvise and make those superstar highlight plays, but you can't always be searching for those. And that was one thing that Patrick Mahomes talked about developing his game. Teams started to realize that. They just sat back and were like, we're going to make him take the checkdowns and the underneath routes, and that's where he got better. Cam Ward has already shown the propensity to make really boneheaded throws. He's got to get those out of his system. Sometimes those are hard to coach out. I will say this. I would rather have a quarterback like that than somebody who's a check down Charlie who's just dinking and dunking very safe, because I do think it's easier to coach it out of a player like Cam Ward just to get him to dial it back a little bit.
We will keep our eye on that. Just of note, he only had 4 interceptions in all of 2024 season, so or the year before that, so just something to keep in mind. If we continue the conversation with these quarterbacks, Shedeur Sanders, there's been a lot of chatter about us retiring his jersey after just 5 minutes in Colorado. We'll leave that conversation there, but when it comes to his red flags, it, of course, is the scrambling, right? The stat we have here, he would be the first quarterback drafted in the first round with negative rush yards in FBS since Josh Rosen in 2018. And when's the last time you heard what Josh Rosen was doing in the NFL?
Yeah, you haven't. He's no longer in there. I think the thing that's concerning for me, Shedeur has the highest football IQ, I think, of all these quarterbacks. He's been around the game. He's been around his dad. He's been a multi-year starter. He's played in multiple systems. I love his knowledge of the game. What I don't love is how he constantly sits in the pocket and tries to make a throw, again, as opposed to throwing it away. Now, Shedeur is not the type that's going to go around trying to run around and make circus plays. I think he does it sometimes because he's like, I don't want to hurt my completion percentage. I'll just take a sack, and then on 2nd and 25, I'll make this flow down the field, and I can get away with it. And oftentimes he did at Colorado. The issue with that is at the next level, I don't think you can get away with that. You've got to be smarter and know when to throw the football away. Again, kind of similar to what the mistakes that Cam Ward was making, albeit a different style of it.
When you look at him and you say, what is something that really stands out about him?
To me, it's his brain.
I give you that, but if you're holding the football, then it's not your brain.
Yeah.
I mean, so what is it? It's not his size. It's not his arm strength. It's not his athletic ability. There's nothing that truly stands out about him, which is why there's questions about him. And I get it. I think he can read the field. I think normally I would agree with you on that. He's the best in this group of doing that, at least of the top quarterbacks. And so, again, what is he on the next level? Not big, not a great arm, not athletic, and there's concerns about him. So I'm with you. I think he turns a lot of plays into messes, and that's a problem. In fairness to him, his offensive line was horrendous.
And that's what I was going to say. How much of that comes from the fact that he played behind a terrible offensive line?
But he's also throwing to some darn good receivers, including the best one in this class in Travis Hunter, too.
And some of those sacks were on him. Sometimes there's a check down available or an easier throw, and they want to go for that big play. Right. They want the big chunk play. That can get you in trouble.
All right, let's talk about a dark horse in this quarterback conversation. Jaxson Dart, a player really in this offseason that skyrocketed a lot of people's draft boards. But it's interesting when you look at how he starts the game versus how he finishes the game. And I hope our producer here can pull up the numbers here just so that we can see it. Because when you look at those first 3 guys, this is a quarterback that I don't mind getting behind. However, when it comes to those big moments, the fourth quarter completion percentage, the touchdown to interception ratio, Danny, what concerns you about Jaxson Dart?
Some of the decision making in crunch time is definitely concerning. I will point this out, though. At Ole Miss, he's going against teams like a Georgia, like Bama, some of the top tier elite programs. And oftentimes, at some of the luxury other players have is playing with a lead. He's playing from behind, trying to make a little bit too much happen and can get in trouble in those situations. I like his upside. I think he's a better arm talent than Shedeur Sanders. I think he's more mobile, but the decision-making, playing in Lane Kiffin's system is one where I think he needs to take a next step, but I've loved the improvement that I've seen out of him while he's been at Oxford. He's consistently gotten better every single year, but there is some concern about some of the late-game heroics, again, trying to make those perfect throws.
You know, they have a name for that if you wilt in the fourth quarter in a big game. It's called Kirk Cousins-itis. That's what that's called. Or Derek Carr-itis.
Like a Cowboys show.
Derek Carr-itis or something. I mean, certain guys that just happens to, and that's never a good look. That's concerning about him. Also, it's simple offense. It's not a complex offense to read. It's a half-field reads, basically. Yep. And so he's going to have a transition to playing in that style. There is a lot to like there, but there are concerns as well.
When it comes to another quarterback coming out of the SEC with concerns, I think everyone was a little surprised to hear Jalen Milroe got the invitation to the NFL draft. I think that that's just been the reality of his career, 15 interceptions in the SEC. However, there's a lot of situations, Danny, where he's able to use his legs to get out of those situations. So I guess my question here is the upside of having, you know, a Jalen Hurts style of approach when the throw's not there, I can just take off, run. How much is that overshadowed by the fact that when he's forced to use his arm, it's not always going to be what you want?
Haley, I know you're not comparing him to Jalen Hurts. I've heard a lot of people say that, though.
Just the leg.
But here's the thing, because he got drafted in the second round. Some people are thinking Milroe go in the second round. Jalen Hurts became a polished passer in college. Like, he started off a little rough, got better, then went to Oklahoma, really flourished in that system, made great decisions from the pocket, fundamentally was more of an accurate, consistent passer. The thing that's frustrating with Milroe throwing the football, he's incredibly inaccurate in the mid-range throws, like the easy throws. He's a great deep ball thrower, but it became almost like they would just take these shots and then you wouldn't have the consistency underneath. He's not a natural thrower of the football, but you run a 4.39, and all of a sudden teams are going to start to become enticed by your athleticism.
He's very streaky, too. I mean, there are games where you look at him and you go, oh, my gosh, this kid can really throw it. And then there are games where he looks like he can never throw a football ever again. And I think we've lived this recently. Isn't this Anthony Richardson 2.0?
I think so, yes.
I mean, that's what it is. We've watched what the Colts have done with Anthony Richardson. He hasn't turned into a polished product throwing the football at all. And so you're taking a chance. And to take a first-round pick and use it on him, I know the Colts did it on Anthony Richardson. I bet they wouldn't now. Yeah. And so I think this is the risk with Jalen Milroe.
Let me ask you this quick follow, because there's been conversation, and you mentioned it, the athleticism maybe overweighing the quarterback situation there. Is there a world where we see Jalen Milroe have a conversation about a position change?
Well, I think, you know, if you can't play, ideally he's going to play quarterback. He's going to try and play quarterback, but if it doesn't work out, then maybe. I mean, we've seen guys make the move. It can happen, but I think he wants to play quarterback.
Build a package for him as an athlete and let him maybe throw out of that package, but he's too good of an athlete not to have the football in his hands.
Or let him learn to play quarterback for 2 years.
While he's having a package to play.
Correct. I agree with you on that one.
All right, we got to get out. We're tight on time there. I'm getting yelled at for asking a follow-up question. When we come back, we continue the conversation on the gridiron. We switch over to the NFL. Jalen Ramsey not happy in SoFlo. We'll hear what Chris Greer had to say about a potential trade up next.